Well, hello everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you all to TNC's latest podcast on the topic of how to achieve sustainable remote working. So, I'm John Waterhouse, CEO of TNC. I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. As I'm sure everyone joining knows, TNC is the UK's largest independent network and telecoms strategy and sourcing consultancy. We support over 280 major UK and multinational organizations with all aspects of their network, telecoms, and mobility strategy, sourcing, deployment, and in life optimization. So, joining us today from TNC to share his experiences and his expertise is our CTO, Craig Northveth. Craig, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, hi John, and welcome to the listeners listening to the podcast today. Thank you.
I'm very on brand today with my new TNC mug for my coffee. Very pleased with that. So look, today's topic it's a cracker. How to achieve sustainable remote working. I mean, seriously, what could be more timely than this? And let's set a bit of context here. So, Craig, what seems like a lifetime ago in April 2020, we did a podcast on how to deliver secure remote working. And, at that time, we were fully in the emergency situation of lockdown and organizations scrambling to get to stand up systems and processes to get their workers out of offices, contact centers, and so on, and get them continuing to be productive or as productive as possible at home.
That's exactly right, John. Yeah. So yeah, it was it does feel like a very long time ago now.
Did you say when you listened to it back today that we said at the end of the pandemic in the autumn?
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
obviously autumn 2021, clearly.
exactly. How naive we were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We talked a lot then about emergency activities or actions required to really kind of continue business. Whether that's through increasing bandwidth, whether it's through adding more security and remote access services, licensing, etc. I guess it's good to kind of look back and report on some of the help that we give customers, and whether it's through advice, whether it's through procurement support. A lot of our customers managed to get through weather the storm, and obviously now topic today we're looking forward to what to do next, effectively, because it does feel like this is a longer game than what we maybe anticipated in the early days of the pandemic.
Turns out we may know a lot about network and telecoms, but we don't know a lot about viruses and pandemics, right?
That's right. Who does?
So I think now we're going to use a term here, right? So, you know, a term that's been in common use over the last 9 months has been the new normal. It's that phase we're in now of dealing with the pandemic. We're going to be looking forwards today into what starting to become known as the next normal. So, you know, difficult as things are now with lockdowns and so on, it does look like there's light at the end of the tunnel, vaccinations, etc., etc. And a lot of organizations are starting to say, well, okay, what is our working practice going to be like after the pandemic, getting into, latter 21 into 22 and so on. Um, and of course, then the question that's interesting for us and hopefully our listeners is, what does that mean in terms of network and telecoms provision? And I think that I suppose the point to make, I guess, what is the kickoff point of this is lots of organisations seem to be saying um, remote working isn't just for the pandemic; it's probably going to continue long term.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of observations that we're making across a set of our customers in this space, and I guess there's two focus areas. One is we're starting to see quite a lot of estate rationalisation or programs of work to look at estate rationalisation. I think there's two aspects of that. One, some organisations just purely closing down sites because they don't see that there's going to be a return demand for that office space. Secondly, we're actually seeing quite a lot of more agile working environments being created in offices as well. So, not really returning to this is your desk, this is where you work, this is the office space that you've got, to a more agile working space where you can drop in more kind of flexible working type environment. So a lot of these organizations have already got the mindset that the remote working mentality or methodology, if you like, is going to continue for the foreseeable. And I think, the opposite side of that, we've also got employees that are quite enjoying it. We've touched upon things like the cost of living and the cost of travel and the tube passes, all this kind of stuff that's not being paid out anymore. So, for a lot of employees, that's actually beneficial as well. So there's two benefits on both sides, both from an employee perspective and from an employer perspective as well. Obviously, there are some challenges, and we'll come on to them as we go through this session today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it certainly seems, survey after survey, so you're absolutely right. Feedback from customers, the customer strategies. But even if you just, look at the surveys, look at what's coming out in the press, no one, whether it's neither employees nor employers, seem to be looking forward to a day where they go back to how things used to be. And as you say, everyone's got a desk and everyone's got a phone and everyone's in the office 5 days a week and so on. That seems, I'm not saying there won't be any of that, but that doesn't look like that's going to be the majority outcome. Um, I suppose that one of the things that triggered us talking about this today, revisiting this topic, is, you know we're seeing a sort of an explosion of strategy projects, which makes sense, right? Because hey, any strategy that any organization wrote before, I don't know, the 1st of July 2020, might as well throw away.
Yeah.
Right, whether it's a commercial strategy, a business strategy, IT strategy, network strategy, get rid of that, because that's not going to be any use to you moving forwards. So everyone's having to look at everything afresh, and of course that means network and telecoms too. I suppose, though, whilst a lot of organizations are looking at the corporate provision, are we going to go SD-WAN? Are we going to go SASE? Are we going to put the contact center in the cloud, etc.? There does appear to be a gap in thinking about how we're going to enable our employees, or ensure at least our employees can connect to these services. If the model in the future is that everyone is at home 3 days a week, for the sake of argument, and only in the office twice a week, the majority of their working time is going to be based on infrastructure that company may not be providing. Is that viable?
Yeah, I think these are some of the challenges that we're starting to see now. So, it's been a forced model, I guess, to date. So we've not had much choice in terms of having to work from home. It's been the only method of access back into the corporate environment. So it's been forced. It's not something been chosen for many organisations. So that kind of best endeavors type of approach in terms of performance, in terms of access, in terms of what devices, that you've got, etc. It's had to be a best endeavors approach. We've got no other choice. I think looking forward now, though, these are core things that are going to have to be considered. So, is the performance of a low cost, low bandwidth DSL service suitable to deliver, certain types of maybe customer facing services or critical application type services, or high earner services, if you like, or is an alternative approach going to be more suitable and I guess sustainable going forward, to deliver that right level of performance for the business. So these are the kind of strategies that outside technology that we're starting to see, that coming from IT, but also there's requirements coming from the likes of HR as well. Who's going to pay for some of this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think you make a really good point. I mean, it's I think there's a question of tolerance, right? That in on the 1st of April last year, when everyone was scrambling into lockdown, etc. Hey, everyone accepted that you might not have a good setup for your webcam, and no one knew how to use Zoom, and performance might not be great, etc. And there might be a cat walking across your desk, and children crying in the background, whatever it is. You know, once the emergency is over, I know a year from now, will that be acceptable? I know for a law firm, is it acceptable for a managing partner to be on a video conference from her home on a broadband that fails halfway through the video conference. 6 months ago, the client probably would have just said, "Hey, that's life."
Yeah.
Is that always going to be the case looking forward? So, and sorry, one other question, Nate, to throw right at you, but to what extent are employees going to be prepared to bring their own office? Because that's the term, really, isn't it? Is, you know, hey, employer, you used to provide me with a desk and a phone and power and heat and light and coffee and water and that infrastructure to enable me to work, and now you're expecting me to give that to you. Hey, I was happy to do that in an emergency and I was pleased to keep my job.
Yeah.
Again, a year from now, maybe employees aren't so keen on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to start seeing, particularly this year, the emergence of standards and policies around this. So we there are no standards. We are starting to see some organisations introduce things like dress code standards when they're
Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah.
and starting to kind of level up to think, well, actually, this is the way we operate now. So if we're going to continue to operate this way, then we do need to have some rules in place, and we need to have some policies in place. We need to have some benefits in place potentially. Employees, as you say, there's a cost associated with providing your own office space. Now, some of that might be expense back. I think what we'll start talking about in a minute is whether or not the introduction of stipends and things like that could be considered, or even going a step further. Particularly for organisations where performance and security and being able to access platforms is critical, whether or not they go to the extent of actually provisioning services into people's homes. But there's lots of new standards and policies that need to be created around that, and principles defined in terms of how it's actually delivered, supported, and the ongoing support for that as well.
Let's get into that, because you raise a good point. So I know we've been doing a lot of work developing a sort of toolkit around what are the different models organizations could use. So if we go back to our original premise, if the pandemic period is considered an emergency, things were done to expedite the ability to keep the lights on, to keep business going. What we're talking here about is looking forward into a more sustainable future. How can you deliver remote working successfully that employees can do it in an open-ended timeline, for the next 3, 5, 7, 10, forever, effectively. So I know we've looked at 3 specific models. We've defined 3 specific models for remote working, which I think we're calling allow, support, and provide. Should we talk through those and sort of how they look and feel and who they apply to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we should start on the allow.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Easy.
Yeah. I mean, so the allow one effectively is the pre-pandemic type model. So it's where organisations would have had remote access capabilities for a subset of people. So for some organisations, let's say take a call centre for instance, that subset of people would have been very small, because the majority of people would work on premise. For organisations, say in construction where there's a lot of field workers, then that might have been quite high. So but the impact of the pandemic for them could have been relatively low because they already had a policy and standards in place to allow remote access. Whereas for the contact centre, trying to get all them agents working from home, we know from experience that's been very difficult for a lot of them types of organisations. So that allow model didn't really exist for them. I think looking forward, I think that will still be relevant for some organisations. There's limited cost from an employer point of view to that allow model. They provision the central infrastructure and internet access into that core platform, and then they expect obviously the employees to provide the broadband access and the heating, the coffee, the light, etc.
Yeah.
And continue with that model. I think what we maybe are expecting is that there'll be an employee challenge on that model going forward. Just because they'll start thinking, well, actually that's money out of my pocket. and I should be recompensated for that in some shape or form. Which
I dread the day when you ring me up to have exactly that conversation.
straight after this session, John.
Absolutely. But no, I think you make a great point. I mean, that model, it existed before. Lots of people worked at home, but I think it was, generally in the pre-pandemic days, that was more senior people.
And ad hoc as well. So
Yeah.
a senior person would probably for the majority of time be on net somewhere.
Yeah.
It would be just on the occasion when they were traveling or working from home or doing something outside of the office that they'd use that capability. So it wasn't an always on type thing as it is now.
And there was no need for it to occur. So if you had if the place you lived had terrible broadband, you didn't work at home. Or if the place, I can see you have your lovely home working setup, which we will return to discussing at some point. I've got mine. If I don't know, if you were a younger person, lived in a shared house, home working wasn't suitable because you couldn't have three of you gathered around one kitchen table. You just didn't do it, and it was a choice, a benefit, So clearly, we've identified some of the pros and cons of that straight away. It's easy to provision for the employer, but for the employee, it relies on them having the wherewithal, the infrastructure to facilitate that. Right, it relies on them having decent broadband, a nice place to be based, etc., etc. So it puts a lot of onus on the employee. That's hence your point about whether that is sustainable long term. Whether employees would say, "Hey, wait a second, I'm not so keen on this now."
Yeah, and I think the other challenge again when we think about sustainability is the start taking into things like performance. Is that model when it's in an always on type of environment? Is the performance security of that type of environment, that type of approach? Is it acceptable? Does it meet these kind of new standards and principles and policies we're starting to talk about? It's highly likely that it probably won't do so. I think we'll probably see more people moving off that allow model into some more of a kind of supported or provide model.
What a beautiful segue into the next model. Therefore, so okay. So if we call allow the sort of level one, sort of fairly basic service or fairly basic model, support, I said, as I understand it, is allow with, generally we're talking financial support here. So the employer potentially, providing, as you say, a stipend or something like that to the employee to facilitate them creating a better setup, I guess.
Yeah, so this would be, I guess, what we know today as like almost like a BYOD type model. So we've seen BYD quite a lot in the mobile space over the last few years. We've seen a little bit in terms of compute, but this is taking it to that next level. This is full on kind of bring your own office type of environment. So this is what it's providing some financial support, probably in the form of a stipend to recompensate for broadband connections, electricity, lighting, etc. But also, I think increasingly, again, on the sustainability point of view, you said we'll come back to it. We probably will do. We're both in our nice offices. We've created offices in our homes, if you like. I think you might have had yours before, but I created mine part of the pandemic. But there was a cost to that, obviously, and it's kind of people to have that same kind of working environment as what you would do in the office. You can't sustain that at the kitchen table for a lot of time, particularly as you mentioned before, if you've got other people in the household as well. So there's going to be a performance impact somewhere if there's not some sort of support package to enable some either technical support and potentially even environmental support to some extent.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've even simple things like desks and chairs and monitors and keyboards and doing this sort of home working checklists around health and safety, and are you sat in a good posture, and all these different things. You're absolutely right. Clearly for someone of your huge wealth. It goes without saying. This is all sustainable, but no, joking. But yeah, I mean, you can absolutely see that that's people aren't going to work at the kitchen table for the next 5 years. They might do it in the short term because they need to, or there's no alternative. But yeah, that's not going to be long term sustainable. I guess though, I can see the stipend model is still pretty easy for the employer. Okay, the employer is now incurring cost, but generally, I think the expectation is that employers are gaining more from being able to rationalize office space than the cost of giving a stipend out to employees. It still puts a lot on the employee. The employee has to do something with that stipend. They have to go and buy the desk and the chair and the monitor and the keyboard and ensure they've got good broadband provision. And so still there's a lot of responsibility on the employee, albeit they're now potentially being compensated for that. But if they don't have the space in the house to put the home office, if they don't know much about technology and so on, there's still that weak link in there of, even if you're getting £20 a month towards your home broadband, if it goes down, it's still not working.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think we might probably see variations of this model that's akin to bring your own device, but also maybe sort of a choose your own type of model as well. So it could be that there's agreements in place with their corporate telco provider to be able to call off circuits and then effectively pay them through the company. So it could be that there's a bit of a hybrid model where if you've got good enough connectivity, you can just take the money, and then that's fine. But if you've not got good enough connectivity, or you need to supplement the connectivity that you've got with an alternative, that you can call that off from your corporate telco provider, and effectively it gets billed back into the enterprise rather than to you directly. So I think we'll start seeing some of these kind of options, if you like, around how to deliver the best level of connectivity to home users.
So again, another beautiful segue into our third model, which is the provide model, which is where the employer goes the next step. So I mean, again, I guess all these three models, it's changing that relationship between what is the employer doing, what's the employee doing. In allow, the employer is doing relatively little, the employee is doing everything. In support, the employer is doing more in the form of financial support, and the employee is at least therefore compensated. In provide, that's turning the relationship around, right? So that is going where the employer goes as far as saying, right, we're going to ensure you have suitable connectivity, we're going to ensure you have the right hardware, because we're not just going to give you money to go and buy it, we're actually going to deliver it to you, as you say, so to expand corporate network provision, for example, corporate mobile provision, and so on.
Yeah, that's right. I think I think the way you've described it there is absolutely spot on. They've kind of a do nothing model, which is the allow, do something model, which is the provide, and a do everything model, which effectively is do something as a support, and do everything is the provide model, where it's more almost mandated that they'll deliver that access into your environment. They'll ensure that it's secure. They'll ensure that it's supported. They'll ensure that you're getting the same level of performance as what you would do if you were in an office. And it's effectively extending the corporate footprint into people's homes. Now, obviously, that comes at a cost.
Yes.
A significant one.
Yes.
And
a complex operating model, right? Because it's one thing provisioning, for example, network connectivity into a head office where 500 people go every day to work. If you're provisioning network connectivity into 500 homes, that's complex, right? Those people are going to be joining and leaving the organization, so you've got to turn it on and off.
Yeah.
Telco contracts are legendarily not that flexible. If someone joins and they leave 6 months later, are you stuck with the circuit for a year?
Yeah.
You've got the billing, you've got people will move house. And hey, look, I know you're probably dying to talk about security and
Yeah, I mean, usage just again, it comes back to the standards and principles and policies around this, doesn't it? So if you are being provided that, so I think this is maybe the difference between the do something and the do everything type models that kind of support and provide. In the support model, if you're getting some sort of financial support towards your current broadband connection, then yeah, you can still play Xbox and PlayStation on it, and your kids can still use it for Teams and stuff like that. But if it's a an enterprise grade broadband connection which is delivered through the company, then maybe you won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Dedicated for your use, and you need to ensure then that it's monitored properly, it's secured properly, it's managed properly, and yeah, as you mentioned, the kind of asset aspect of it and the billing aspect of it again needs to be tracked, and full change control around moves, adds, and changes appropriately in line with HR processes.
Yes. So I think from what we've seen so far, and again, actually, BYOD is the perfect example. You know, BYOD is not a one size fits all solution. You don't say everyone in my organization, well, most organizations don't mandate BYOD for every user. That they've got different tiers of users or different, there's some sort of eligibility type question. Presumably, that's the answer here as well. That for your very critical people, going back to the managing partner idea, probably provide is the right model for them. They're high contributors to the organization. They presumably are long-term stable employees, or more likely to be. And so the cost of failure is much greater. Other types of employees are perhaps more transitory or lower. So presumably that's what this is what we're seeing organizations do, is end up with that sort of eligibility type model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a hybrid across probably all three of the models. So there needs to be technical capability and financial support, and mechanisms within the kind of enterprise contracts to be able to support all three of these options. So I think I guess when we think about takeaways for this, and think about some of the work that we're doing still now on enterprise contracts, ensuring that there are clauses within the enterprise contracts to enable a level of flexibility, both from a commercial, contractual, and technical point of view, to facilitate this in the future. These are key things that we're starting to consider, just to make sure it's not a matter of having to do a contract amendment or anything too complex. It's something that's already in there. You understand what the costs associated would be, and it's something that you can deliver if you so wish to do so.
And I guess I'm conscious of time, so we're going to have to wrap up pretty quickly. But I mean, as far as I can see, this is a net benefit. For those procurement people listening, those who have got a commercial eye on this, this is a net benefit, because you're potentially going to your telco provider and saying, "Hey, you know how you provide our 100-site corporate network today? How do you fancy it being 500 sites? Because we're going to put 400 of our more senior staff onto that network." I mean, that's a great conversation to have in terms of giving you leverage to get that new service competitive, but to drive you know competition across the rest of your services. So I mean, actually, from a procurement perspective, this is potentially pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a fairly big fat juicy carrot to dangle, I think. Particularly if the eligibility studies that are carried out suggest that that's going to be the approach, then absolutely. I think it's a lot of leverage to be added to some of the conversations at negotiation level for sure.
So just conscious of takeaways, because we should draw things to a close. I'm sure I think we're vastly over time anyway, but we'll draw a veil across that. Um, Developing that that toolkit, that eligibility policy, that strategy, and integrate it into the wider application strategy, network strategy. Presumably, that's item one on the list for organisations. That's what they really need to be starting to do.
Yeah, I think that sustainability strategy is key, and involving stakeholders across the business, particularly kind of HR, IT stakeholders, to understand exactly what the requirements are going forward,
Yeah.
and how that will fit from a commercial perspective, but also a technical and operational perspective as well.
It goes without saying that we're extremely skilled at helping organizations do that. But there I go. I said it goes without saying, and then I've said it. But
Yeah,
that's the case, right?
yeah. I mean, the point you raised around the eligibility studies, and again tying that back into things like BYOD, we've done a lot of that in the past for some big organisations, really understanding a couple of things. One, what's the right model for them? So, we've had conversations with organisations who are maybe on big enterprise networks, but they want to go BYOD, and really doing a full detailed analysis around who that would suit, what the cost would be, how you'd effectively execute it. So it's a similar kind of framework or process that I think we would certainly adopt for this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're quite right about the costs. That ultimately, like anything, there's a cost question around this as well. You know, most of these, any model other than allow is going to cost money.
Yeah.
And that's going to need to be, to be considered alongside potentially the cost benefits of reduced office space and so on.
Yeah.
Craig, I'm conscious we're probably at the end of our time. Fascinating as always. Always great to hear your insights and your experiences in this space. I think this is obviously a very fast evolving area. I look forward to our next podcast on this in 6 or 8 months' time, and looking back on, clearly all the things we got right in our predictions, and perhaps one or two we got slightly off.
Can we do that one on the beach somewhere, John?
Deal. It's a deal. We'll do it in the Bahamas. Fantastic. And thank you everyone for listening. It's always a pleasure to present these podcasts to you. Please do let us know any questions you may have about this or any other topic. You can get in touch with us through the website at networkcollective.co.uk and any of our usual social channels. We look forward to talking with you again soon.